So you want to know what class to pick before starting to play the game? Or you want to send us to someone that can't make their mind with picking a class? Hopefully I can help you choose in this video. To let you know, I'll be talking about all the jobs you can pick from the very start, aka only the Aroma-born classes. I'll give a small description about the class, what to expect from them as you level them up, and how dungeons and raids usually go, so that way you're ready for anything that the game throws at you. As sadly, the game doesn't do a good job at explaining most of the things. If you're an experienced player and think I missed something or want to add to this, let me know in the comments. By the way, the background footage will be of high level content and doesn't represent the early learning levels of the game, so don't get spooked by it. So with all that said, let's start with talking about the Conjurer, which evolves into a white mage at level 30. Conjurer will have you start in Gridania, and this healer is considered a pure healer, a healer that excels at raw healing. A pretty easy to understand class that will get you far in the game and learn most of the mechanics and rules of the game. So let's get to explaining how this job works and what to expect while you level it up. Conjurer evolves to White Mage once reached level 30, and from now onwards I'll be calling these classes by their job name. Jobs is what people call the evolution of the classes, and don't worry, there's no difference in gameplay between classes and jobs, so you aren't missing out on anything. White Mage's healing toolkit consists of using your cure spells and your medica spells. Your cure spells are single target, which means that it's for one player only, while medica spells are for party-wide healing. There's an exception where Cure 3 is an AoE spell that spawns on a target player. Cure 1 is your earliest healing spell, and eventually it upgrades into Cure 2, and once Cure 2 is unlocked, that'll be your main source of single target healing for most of your leveling journey. Though Cure 1 has very situational and niche usages, so don't remove that skill from your hotbar. As a healer in FF14, your job is not only to heal the party and keep everyone safe, but it's also to deal damage whenever you can. And I'll explain to you how you balance both defense and offense. FF14 is a game where damage is very important, and every class in the game is expected to be dealing damage, and of course, that includes the healer. Healers have single target spells that deal damage and AoE spells to deal with groups of enemies. The way you learn when it's safe to deal damage will mostly come with experience, as while starting out, you might feel nervous to deal damage as you don't quite know how much damage each enemy does and how well a tank can tank. But if you need some advice, the time where you might want to start healing is when a tank hits below 50% HP, but other than that, if the tank isn't close to dying, you'll be mostly helping your fellow DPS players killing either the boss or the group of enemies. As every player will tell you, enemies dying faster means less healing to be done, so keep that in mind while playing healer. Paladin is one of the two tanks you can pick at the start, and the whole fantasy is that you're the Holy Knight with abilities and skills to protect and heal other party members. And if you pick Paladin, it will start you in Ul'dah. As a Paladin, your job is to be the one grabbing attention from enemies while your party deals damage to them. There's a few rules on how to approach that, but I'll be tackling that later in the video where I talk about how a dungeon normally goes. But for now, let's talk about how Paladin works. Paladin's damage rotation consists of only 3 skills, also known as a 1-2-3 combo. That's gonna be your bread and butter when it comes to dealing damage to a single target enemy. But whenever you're dealing with groups, you'll be using your AoE attacks. Paladin has some defensive skills like Reprisal, Rampart, and Sentinel, which will be explained later on, but that is your main source of damage reduction. Paladin also has a self buff that will allow you to deal extra damage for a few seconds, so it's good to use it whenever you have access to it. Later on, Paladin will gain access to magic spells that can deal damage or heal teammates, and also provide extra defense. So the more you level, the more you'll become a Holy Knight. Warrior is the other tank that you have access to, and the whole deal with this class is that you're all about raw strength and being able to self-sustain with your own healing skills. So Warrior, in comparison to Paladin, has less defensive abilities, but it has a lot more self-sustain in the sense that a lot of Warrior's abilities will end up healing you up. And a good example would be that your main damage rotation, aka your 1-2-3 combo, will heal you after delivering the 3rd hit. Warrior also has a damage buff just like Paladin, Paladin, but this time around, Warrior always has access to this buff. So as a Warrior, you want to do your damage rotation while keeping that damage buff active as much as you can. The more you level up Warrior, the more healing the Warrior will be able to do. So much healing, in fact, that, believe it or not, you won't even need the help of healers. But that only includes later dungeons and nothing else. So pretty much, as a Warrior, your whole deal is to deal as much damage as you can while healing yourself, releasing your inner Unga Bunga and going crazy on your enemies. Monk is your martial artist class. It excels in close-ranged combat and is actually the only class in the whole game that doesn't have a ranged attack, so it's all about being up close and personal with your enemies. Monk's damage rotation includes a lot of dancing around the enemy, and what I mean by that is that there is attacks that deal more damage from the back or the sides of the enemy. Those are called positionals, and positionals is something that every melee DPS class needs to keep in mind. So as a monk, you still have your 1-2-3 combo like most melee classes, but you'll be jumping between the back or the sides of the enemy. Monk also, if I'm not wrong, feel free to correct me on this, but Monk has the fastest cooldown out of every class in the game, which means you'll be pressing buttons faster than any other class in the game. As you level up, you'll gain more buttons and your damage rotation will become faster and busier, so if that is something you enjoy, absolutely recommend playing Monk. Dragoon is one of the most iconic classes of Final Fantasy, a specialist at defeating dragons with its jump attacks and with its nimble spear skills. Dragoon is a pretty fast-paced and nimble class. Dragoon is a job about jumping all over the place, quite literally. You have skills to backflip out of danger or jump right into the enemy to close the gap, including dashes and such. It is a very mobile class if that is something you like. But because of its mobility, Dragoons are usually known for jumping off cliffs and dying, so you gotta be mindful where you are backflipping to. Dragoon has positionals and self buffs to keep in mind while you're doing your damage rotation, while also including buffs that guarantee crits, so there's a certain aspect of planning your damage rotation to know which attacks to make a guaranteed critical hit. So first things first, there's no stealthing in this game, even though you do get a hide skill that makes you invisible, but that skill is actually not used for stealthing, but for a completely different reason. So let's get that out of the way in case you want to play ninja for the sake of being a stealthy class, because sadly, it's not the case. But ninja does have a very busy, very fast, and very flashy moveset that just gets better and better the more you level. Ninja is all about using melee attacks while also using your ninjutsus, which are pretty much magic skills for whenever you need to be at range. Ninja has its positionals like the other melee DPS, but has the freedom of attacking from range whenever they need to distance themselves from the enemy. Ninja, just like Dragoon, has some decent mobility whenever you need to move around. Especially Ninja has a 10% movement speed by default, so while playing Ninja, you can get to places slightly faster than any other class. Bard is what we call in FF14 a support DPS class, a class that isn't focused on dealing tons of damage, but focused on buffing and supporting the team with its music. Bard's damage rotation consists of keeping 2 different damage over time attacks while switching between different songs. Each song that Bard has does a different effect. So while playing Bard, you'll be focused on keeping your damage over time and keeping your buffing songs up all the time. It is a very fast-paced class, always pressing buttons all the time and with tons of movement freedom because Bard is considered a physical ranged class, which means that they can attack while moving, so are always free to deal damage while dodging enemy attacks. Now we're talking about my favorite class in the whole game. Black Mage is your stereotypical fantasy mage. It focuses on destructive elemental magic, with each attack requiring to stand still to cast a spell. As a Black Mage, you're going to be balancing between fire and ice phases, fire phase being your damage phase, while ice phase being your mana recovery phase. Black Mage also has a damage over time to maintain. The biggest and most important advice for Black Mage is that you don't want to sit only on Ice Phase, nor only deal lightning damage, because this game built Black Mage to be a fire-focused mage, more like a pyromancer, a very stationary class that the more you level, the more flashy and powerful it gets. It's currently one of the strongest classes in the game. Now for last but not least, we're going to be talking about Summoner and Scholar, which are very special case when it comes to how they work, so let's talk about it. It might have have found weird that there's only one healer to pick at the very start of the game. But don't worry, there's actually another healer, but it's locked behind Arcanist. By reaching level 30 as Arcanist, you can either become a Scholar or a Summoner. So let's talk about both of these by starting with Summoner. Summoner is a class that summons pets to do big attacks. If you like the fantasy of summoning elemental entities to help you battle, you will enjoy Summoner. Especially as later in your leveling journey, you will be able to summon demigods to fight alongside you. Also, Summoner is one of the few DPS classes that can actually resurrect a downed player. And now we're going to be talking about Scholar. You remember when I said that White Mage is a pure healer, right? Well, Scholar is what we consider in-game a shield healer, a class that is all about shielding the team and increasing the defense of the party by reducing incoming damage. While playing Scholar, you'll have a little fairy helping with healing, which you can command to use specific skills for stronger heals and defense. You have your single target shields alongside your party-wide shields. You can also create a zone in the ground that whoever's inside takes reduced damage. Scholar is all about preemptive healing, mitigating as much damage before it happens, and shielding the party whenever a big attack is about to happen. The more you level, the more defensive tools you'll get and stronger fairy skills will be unlocked. So now you know more or less what to expect from each job you can pick from now. I'll be explaining you what to expect when it comes to the dungeon content, raid content, and alliance raid content. Don't worry, this isn't as scary as you might think. So with that said, let's start on how every role is expected to do in a dungeon. Let's talk about DPS, as it's the simpler role when it comes to the combat content, so let's talk about it. As a DPS, regardless if you're a melee, mage, or physical range, you're the player which deals the most damage, which is self-explanatory. But the main reason why I'm saying that is because if you don't do a whole lot of damage, that means that the tanks will take more damage, meaning that it becomes more dangerous for tanks to tank enemies after a while, and becomes more stressful for healers to keep up. So as a DPS, if you're fighting a group of enemies, you want to use your AoE attacks to deal damage to all of the enemies so they die as soon as possible, helping tanks and healers in the process. But now let's talk about boss encounters. It depends on what kind of DPS you are, so let's go through all types of DPS. First, as a melee DPS, you want to be close to the boss and always either on the sides of the boss or the back of the boss, because as a melee, you have positionals that you need to land. So positioning yourself like this around a boss makes your life to land attacks a lot easier and keeps you safe from the boss, because a lot of bosses will cleave in front of them, so by staying behind the boss will make you safe and not take damage. Now let's talk about casters, aka your mages. It's not very different from the melee DPS when it comes to your damage rotation. Use your AoE attacks on groups of enemies and use your single target attacks on bosses. The way you position as a mage is behind the boss, like the melee DPS, but you don't want to be super far away from the boss, because if you're too far away from everybody for the sake of playing safe, which is normal to want to keep your distance as a mage, but it will make the life of the healer very hard to keep everybody healed, as you'll be out of range. One thing that you need to keep in mind is that as a mage, you have to stand still to attack, especially if you play Black Mage. So staying still behind the boss is your best bet to keep dealing damage while remaining safe. Now lastly, physical range, which is Bard, as at the start of the game, you only have access to Bard. Everything from earlier applies to Bard, but the difference is that you want to keep your songs up as much as possible, and to not forget to keep your damage over time attacks. Also, one more thing, remember you can keep dealing damage while moving, so you can dodge mechanics while dealing damage. With the DPS explained, let's talk about tanking, which can be very scary for beginners, so let me explain it. I'll be telling you the very basics of how tanking works so you can start slow and learn at your own pace. As a tank, be sure to turn on your tank stance whenever you get into a dungeon, as you usually have your tank stance off, and the tank stance is the only way to consistently grab the attention of the enemies. You'll be running in front of your party and will be the one grabbing the enemies to form a group. Be sure to grab enemies by using your ranged attacks or spam your AoE attacks. You don't want to use your single target attacks in groups, not because you deal less damage, but because if you stop dealing damage to an enemy, they will slowly stop being aggressive towards you and will start attacking a DPS player or a healer. So spamming your AoE attacks will guarantee guarantee that the enemies won't look away from you. Be sure to use your mitigation skills like Reprisal and Rampart during the group fights, as that will make you capable of tanking more damage and making the life of the healer easier and simpler. Though you don't want to use all of your defensive skills at the very same time. You want to space them out so you have defensive skills for the next group fight. So you have to keep that in mind while tanking groups. When it comes to boss fights, you'll do your 1-2-3 combos while having the boss face away from the party. As I explained earlier on the DPS category, bosses most time than not will use cleaving attacks that will hit everybody in front of it. So by positioning yourself where the boss is looking away from the party, protects the party from potential damage and allows them to deal damage in a more safe way. As a healer, your job is to keep your party alive and not fully healed. What that means is that as long as your party members aren't dead, you're doing your job right, as you want to help your party with dealing damage. Like I explained at the very start, when you should and shouldn't heal depends on the dungeon and depends on the tank you are with. Sometimes you'll need to heal more, other times you're free to do more damage. In group fights, every healer in the game has AoE spells, so if you don't need to heal, be sure to spam those. The earlier they die, the less healing needing to be done. In single target fights like bosses, what you'll do is that you'll place a damage over time on the boss and will need to refresh it every time the damage over time runs out. In the meantime, you'll be mostly dealing damage while keeping an eye on your party. When it comes to positioning, be sure to be behind the boss like the DPS, and you'll be fine. Alliance raids in FF14 are like dungeons, but with 24 people, and you get assigned to a random alliance raid every time. Every rule that I explained earlier on how to handle group fights and boss fights are applied here, but one major thing I want to explain is how to understand where you need to go, as a lot of alliance raids will separate you and will need you to go to different alliance locations. So let's talk about it. So there's 3 alliances: A, B, and C. Whenever there's a forked path and you must split up and go with your party, you can either follow your party or learn how to decipher where to go. Envision this: A, B, C. A is on the left of B, so you go to the leftmost path. B is between A and C, which means you go into the middle path, while C is to the right of B, so you go to the furthest most right path. This works in almost every situation where the party needs to split up. For tanks, nothing changes for a normal dungeon. The only thing that changes is that there's 2 other tanks in the alliance raid. You can either allow one of the tanks to become the main tank while you play in the back alongside everybody, or you take the role of main tank and tank the boss. Depending on the region you are on, you might have rules on who acts as a main tank and who doesn't, but I sadly don't know the rules for every server. But I know in European servers, usually the one main tanking is whoever attacks the boss first. Healers doesn't change much, other than now you have a co-healer helping you keep the team alive. Generally, that's it. Nothing else changes, and the same goes for the DPS. In normal raids, things become a little bit interesting. Your party is formed of 2 tanks, 2 healers, and 4 DPS. In general, the rules don't change much other than tanks deciding who gets the attention of the boss and who plays as a off tank. Other than that, the way you handle the boss is exactly the same. Have the boss look away from the party, have everybody behind the boss, and be aware of cleaving attacks. And this should be the very basics on what to expect from this game. The game gets more complex and adds a lot more things to the overall experience, but this should help you choose a job and know what to expect from the game's future content. There's plenty of other guides out there that dive deep into the specifics of each and every class in the game, but hopefully this sets you up on your journey in FF14 and grasps the game and its mechanics sooner than most players. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to reply. And if you're an experienced player and you would like to add more information, be sure to let us know. Or if I missed out on anything super crucial. I want to thank these wonderful peeps for supporting me and allowing me to experiment with content like this: Vardis, Zeren, Resolute Visit, Ultrax, Renkai, Mochi Fried-Off, Mikey, Duskless, and is Joe Official. Be sure to check out my content for challenge runs if that interests you, but for now, I'll be seeing you on my next video.